Picture this. It's a rainy Thursday night in downtown Chicago. The rain is just absolutely lashing against the heavy, revolving glass doors of this stunning, ultra-luxurious building. What we're about to dive into in this explainer starts with a simple, quiet standoff. But it's a standoff that's going to eventually send absolute shockwaves through a multi-million-dollar empire. So let's set the scene. Okay, so it is exactly 10:18 p.m. at the Hawthorne Grand Hotel. The very last guest has just walked out, and the lobby is dead silent. I want you to really imagine the cold, echoing expanse of that pristine marble floor, right? Over on a leather sofa, there sits a little girl. She's maybe 8 years old, curled up, clutching this faded brown teddy bear. She looks incredibly pale, clearly sick. And standing right beside her, just holding a simple paper cup of hot chocolate, is an elderly janitor in a faded blue maintenance uniform.
And suddenly, breaking that heavy silence is a ruthless ultimatum from the hotel's general manager. He's pointing dead at the exit, and he snaps, "You've got 60 seconds to leave before I call security." Now just feel the tension in that room for a second. The manager is furious, but the old man, he doesn't flinch. Honestly, he doesn't even move. He just looks down at the frightened little girl, gives her a really soft smile, and says, "It's okay, sweetheart. Sometimes good people make bad decisions."
Now, here's the crazy part. No one in that lobby realizes who they're actually threatening to throw out. That quiet maintenance worker standing there? That's actually Ethan Carter, a billionaire and the founder of a massive empire of over 40 luxury hotels. He literally built this very hotel 30 years ago. Samuel Brooks is just his current alias. You see, Ethan despised the typical billionaire trappings. He hated the expensive suits, the cameras, all of it. So for the last 6 months, he'd been secretly working in his own hotel under a completely fake name. So you might be wondering, why on earth would a billionaire scrub floors and change light bulbs? Well, it all chases back to a profound piece of advice from his late wife, Margaret. She once told him, "If people know you're the owner, they're going to show you their best behavior. But if they think you're nobody, they'll show you who they really are." After she passed away, Ethan turned her words into this yearly tradition. And he wasn't doing it to play undercover boss or catch people breaking silly rules. He did it because he genuinely wanted to observe humanity, to really understand the people running his buildings. And deep undercover at the Hawthorne Grand, Ethan made a pretty sobering discovery. On paper, sure, the numbers were phenomenal. The hotel looked incredibly successful. But the culture? It was entirely broken. Over his 6 months there, Ethan observed a deeply toxic environment. Employees, they only smiled when wealthy guests walked in. Everyday families wearing normal clothes, they were made to wait longer. Housekeepers were completely ignored, and bellmen were constantly used as scapegoats for management's mistakes. It was a beautiful building, but it had an incredibly ugly soul. But amid all this corporate apathy, Ethan found one beacon of hope. Her name was Maria. She worked the evening shift cleaning the public areas. And Maria was the absolute exception to the rule. I mean, she authentically cared. She remembered children's names. She even carried dog treats in her pockets for guests traveling with pets. She always went out of her way to greet people first. Nobody ordered her to do this, by the way. She just fundamentally believed that kindness was something everyone deserved. Which brings us right back to that rainy Thursday night. The tension we started with is about to completely explode. A young woman rushes into the lobby. She's soaked to the bone, utterly exhausted, and carrying that sleeping, feverish little girl we saw earlier. Her car had just broken down 2 blocks away in the pouring rain. She walks up to the desk, desperate, whispering apologies, explaining that her daughter has a fever and she has a confirmed reservation. But instead of empathy, she just hits a wall of ice. The receptionist barely even looks up. When the mother pleads that she already paid online and has the confirmation right there, the receptionist sighs dramatically, and then she delivers a complete, cold dismissal. "The system says no rooms, you'll have to leave." All the while, as the little girl starts coughing, Ethan is quietly watching the whole thing unfold from across the lobby, just pretending to change a light bulb. At this point, Ethan decides he can no longer just watch. He steps out of the shadows. He walks up and calmly asks to see the mother's phone. And in seconds, he diagnoses the issue. It wasn't a system failure at all, it was human error. The receptionist had misspelled the guest's last name by a single letter, and honestly hadn't even bothered to check carefully. So Ethan, playing the role of the helpful janitor, politely points out this incredibly simple mistake. The reaction he gets? Pure defensive arrogance. The receptionist actually rolls her eyes at him and snaps, "Maintenance doesn't work the front desk, I know my job." Wow. It is a devastating blow to the young mother. After driving all day, carrying her sick child through the rain, and now facing this completely unnecessary hostility, she's utterly defeated. She breaks down in tears right there in the lobby. But remember Maria? She sees this happening, and without a second thought, she immediately defies the unspoken hierarchy of the hotel. Without asking for anyone's permission, she walks right over to the mother and child. She brings a warm housekeeping blanket and wraps it tightly around the shivering little girl. She hands her a cup of fresh hot chocolate, and for the very first time that terrible evening, the little girl smiles. And that's when the general manager storms over. Now, he doesn't apologize to the weeping mother. He doesn't ask about the sick child. No, he goes straight for Ethan. Stay in your lane, he demands. When Ethan calmly asks if anyone even bothered to really search for the guest's reservation, the manager delivers his ultimatum. We don't answer to janitors. You can clock out now. It's a direct threat of termination right on the spot. The lobby goes dead silent. But then, an incredibly brave voice cuts through the tension. It's Maria. Sir, he was only trying to help. I want you to think about the risk she's taking here. The manager immediately turns his wrath on her, demanding to know if she wants to lose her job too. That heavy, suffocating silence returns to the room. The power dynamic is completely skewed, and in his mind, the manager thinks he's won. But then, Ethan reaches into his pocket. He doesn't pull out a smartphone to fire them. He doesn't pull out a fancy embossed business card. No, he pulls out an old silver key. It's the original master key to the very first Carter hotel he ever built way back in 1994. He places it gently on the pristine marble counter. The manager looks at it, totally confused, and just scoffs, "So?" Ethan smiles softly. He slowly removes his faded blue maintenance cap, and he delivers the shockwave. I suppose it's time to introduce myself. My name is Ethan Carter. I own this hotel and every other Carter property in this country. The emotional shift in that room, it is cinematic. The receptionist lets out this dying, nervous little laugh that just abruptly stops. The arrogant general manager turns completely pale. And Maria, she just stares in absolute, sheer disbelief. Within minutes, the whole dynamic completely flips. Panicked regional executives come rushing into the lobby after an emergency phone call. They're expecting a boardroom meeting. Instead, they find their billionaire founder in a janitor's uniform, holding an impromptu interrogation right there on the lobby floor. Ethan holds up his hand to stop their frantic apologies. He points directly at the young mother and asks the executives this piercing question. Why was she treated like she didn't matter? The silence from the executives is absolutely deafening. Then, Ethan shifts his intense gaze. He points to Maria, who's still standing quietly to the side. He asks the room, why was she the only employee who noticed this little girl's fever? He completely weaponizes that heavy silence to expose the total moral bankruptcy of the hotel's leadership. You see, it wasn't just about missing a reservation. It was about a fundamental failure of basic human decency. Ethan then begins to walk slowly across the lobby, and he shares a memory. He talks about his very first hotel. They couldn't afford marble floors or chandeliers or even matching furniture, but every single guest left feeling deeply respected. And then he delivers this defining philosophy. Luxury begins with kindness. Everything else is decoration. It's a powerful reminder, right? All the money in the world can't buy a genuinely caring culture. The immediate aftermath brings this huge wave of relief. The young mother doesn't just get a standard room. She is immediately upgraded to the presidential suite, completely free of charge. The hotel's private doctor is called in to examine the little girl, and by morning, her fever is finally breaking. 3 days later, when they check out, the mother leaves a heartfelt handwritten note. Thank you for reminding my daughter that kindness still exists. Maria actually kept that note in her wallet for years. But the ripple effects went far, far beyond that one night. Ethan launched a full corporate review of the entire empire. Several managers were fired, and not for technical mistakes, but because they had simply stopped caring. Training programs across all 40-plus hotels were completely overhauled to prioritize empathy. And in a beautiful stroke of poetic justice, Maria was promoted to Director of Guest Experience. The most permanent change, however, was a new rule added to the front page of every single employee handbook in the company. It read, treat every guest as though they are carrying an invisible story. Because, as Ethan realized watching that exhausted mother in the rain, They probably are. It's a pretty powerful testament to the fact that we never truly know the burdens the people walking through our doors are carrying. When Ethan called Maria a month later to officially offer her that director position, she was just overwhelmed. She cried on the phone, telling him, "I've never managed people." But Ethan just smiled and replied, "I know, you've been leading them anyway." It just goes to show true leadership doesn't require an official title. It requires action, empathy, and courage when it really counts. Today, years after that stormy night, new employees at Carter Hospitality don't sit through orientations hearing about a brilliant billionaire or corporate profit margins. No, they hear a completely different story. They hear about a tired mother, a sick little girl, a quiet maintenance worker everyone ignored, and a simple housekeeping blanket that changed the soul of an entire company. Because kindness doesn't suddenly become valuable just because an important person notices it. Its value is always there, waiting for the right person to see it. You know, the people who change our lives rarely arrive wearing expensive suits or holding impressive titles. Sometimes they arrive carrying a toolbox, wearing a faded blue uniform, and simply refusing to walk away from someone who needs help. So as we wrap up this story, I want to leave you with this. Who are the invisible people in your life right now? And what invisible story might they be carrying?